start. I'm just gonna start recording. It's just what it is.
Okay. So we're live.
Yeah,
We're doing it live. How the levels look?
everything looks good.
Nothing's
ahead.
clipping.
No, hitting
Right.
the yellow there, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yellow. Peeking into the yellow is good. That's
Yeah.
what we want.
yeah.
So Avenged Sevenfold.
Mm.
I picked this band because I've been listening to them. I think when City of Evil came out. Closing door. Is the camera on me? Is it on?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is?
it's on
All right.
you. Yeah.
I'm sitting here talking. It's just an empty camera. I forget what year City of Evil is. I'm going to pull it up. But that was around the time World of Warcraft came out, like the original vanilla, 2004. So City of Evil, I can always, when I think of certain albums, I think of what I was playing at the time. And there's two albums, two or three around the World of Warcraft area. City of Evil was one. Trivium and Breaking Benjamin were the three bands I had on repeat when I was playing that game for I don't know how many years at the time, but I didn't appreciate that album, I don't think, as much back then because it's more complicated than you really realize. It's very progressive. The songs are like 8 minutes long a piece, and they go all over the place. But the guitar work's incredible. The drumming is on point. The album kind of sounds like shit, but
This is City of Evil.
this is City of Evil. This was where I was kind of starting on this one because that was the album that will always kind of be special to me. But
You should have told me that because I got the wrong album cover up. But that's okay.
yeah, I don't think you have to change the album cover each time. Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't really listen to Waking the Fallen or Sounding the Seventh Trumpet really at all. I think I went back to Waking the Fallen because there's a lot of guitar songs on that are popular, like Unholy Confessions. But like as we go forward, the guitar tone gets better. Starting on the Seventh Trumpet was like somebody was in their garage band and they just put a mic up, and that does not sound good.
Yeah.
Sounding
no,
the Seventh Trumpet was awful.
I agree. The first album is well. First of all, like his voice. I can't believe they didn't try to find a new singer because
I knew you were going to say something
It's-
about his voice.
like I've never been a huge fan of his, I guess, vocal style, but his voice it was very pitchy and it was kind of all over the place, especially on the very first album, especially. And
It's rough.
and when I looked into the band, he wasn't the original founder. It was founded by three other guys. I believe it was like the guitarist, the drummer, and maybe
he came later, or it
he
wasn't-
did.
Yeah.
And it surprised me even more that they didn't decide to like get rid of him, or, you know, 'cause I'm listening to this album and I just don't understand like what he was really going for. But the mix itself on that, it was pretty flat.
Extremely flat. Nothing has girth.
Yeah, it's flat. It's inconsistent. It just, and then the voice on top of that. It's like listening to Geddy Lee in his late
I was
days,
just thinking
where you know I'm a huge Rush fan, but I can't listen to Geddy Lee past like 2010.
That was on that album they scream the most, and it doesn't. I'm glad they kind of got away from that because I don't care for the way he screams at all. And you're right about his voice. He's like, it's extremely, I don't know if raspy is the right word, but it's got like a hoarse, I don't even know what to call it. It's unique.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't sound. It wasn't pleasant to listen to.
That first album is not pleasant to listen to. It
There's-
gets better. It's more melodic on the second one. Sounding the Seventh Trumpet is like very raw. It's almost like post-hardcore punk,
Yeah,
where it's kind of meant to be rough and loose like that. Maybe, I don't know. That album's like 20-some years old at this point, too.
Right.
They were in their 20s probably when they made it, but
I actually can't believe they made it, to be honest with you. That's how bad it was, the first album at least. Yeah, I mean, overall, it was not a it wasn't anything to write home about, that first album, at all.
Even like performance wise, I couldn't tell you a name of a song on that album. I didn't start. I probably would have never gotten into them if that was the first album I heard. Like City of Evil got me in. Waking the Fallen a little bit later, but yeah, that one is just, it's so different. Waking the Fallen sounds like it a little bit. It's still pretty flat. I think they improved a little bit on that one, but the production quality is still, it's only a small step forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, Waking the Fallen, actually, I think it sounded worse.
You thought it sounded worse?
Yeah, it was actually, it's quieter. It got quieter and it got flatter.
Interesting.
Was my notes, yes. The guitars are always too quiet. Even on their good albums, I think their guitars are still just a pinch too quiet.
I agree with that.
On Hail to the King, which we'll get to, but there's something about it where I'm like, drums sound phenomenal on that album, but even that, I'm like, the guitars are just a little bit too far back. But on Waking the Fallen, it sounded like, the album sounds like static. Like it's lacking like a major treble component that the first one has. Like it's almost like the treble's dialed down, and it's like it's closed in more. It's quieter, and I think it. I don't know how it was possible they achieved it to sound worse than the first album.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty close. Yeah,
it sounds unfinished.
That's a good word. It's unpolished. It feels like they didn't. Whatever they did in the studio, they kind of recorded it, and that was it. The guitar tone, I thought, got worse on Waking the Fallen. I don't like that guitar sound at all. It might be the worst one. There's something very thin about it. I don't even know how to describe it. Yeah, it doesn't chug.
No, it does not chug. I know you're more of a stickler on guitar sound. I'm not quite as, I guess, because you being a guitarist and me being a drummer, I guess that makes a little more sense. Where sure. I pick out more of drum sounds or bass drum sounds. I did worst guitar, worst foot pedal, and worst cymbals here on the whole discography. Ooh. I don't know if you picked up on any of that yourself.
Worst guitar, I think so. Worst kick is probably, I'm gonna go with. It's either the self-titled or I don't know, because there's some songs on the stage I thought were inconsistent with the drum mix. I'm gonna go with Seventh Trumpet, or it's gonna be self-titled. For worst kick.
For me, the worst kick pedal was City of Evil.
Ooh.
Because it's just all attack.
I was going to say, it's very clicky and attacky.
It was attack. The drum, actually, all the drums on that, like, I don't care for the snare sound. I don't know if it fits that album.
It's a unique one.
It's almost like Slipknot snare. But there, for some reason, it works with them. But it's got that high-pitched snare sound, and then it's all attack bass drum through City of Evil, which I don't like. And what else do I have here? Again, a flat album.
It's very flat. It's no girth. What we were saying about the kick drum, which is interesting. I don't think that's a bad kick sound. I kind of like the way the drums sound on that, but I see what you're saying about it's very heavy on the attack. There's no oomph or kick to it.
Right.
So to speak.
The drums are too quiet, I think, on City of Evil. I feel like I had to pick things out of the mix a bit too much with it. It's weird because like his vocals sounded like they were recorded from far away, but then they feel like they're louder than everything else. Yeah. It's a very odd thing. Like his voice doesn't sound like it's right there, but it just sounds like if it's cranked up and recorded from a distance, if that makes any sense. is what I got off that.
It's definitely like I noticed on a lot of their albums, the vocals and the guitar sometimes, but mostly the vocals are always the loudest, and the drums sometimes get pushed back, or the guitars get pushed back and the drums are forward, but the vocals are always sitting. I think on that album they have the most vocal tracks out of any album. There's so many layers of him doing harmonies and all crazy stuff. Like, I think that's part of the reason why that mix gets so messed up. They just have too much going on.
It could be.
There's at least 4 different guitar tracks, because you got probably 2 rhythms and then the harmonies, and then there's other harmonies, and then I think the vocals start layering more and more on top of that too, and there's like it doesn't feel cohesive, even though there's so much stuff in there.
Right.
So that was my biggest takeaway, I think, for that one. I still love that album front to back. I could listen to the whole thing anytime.
Interesting. I think that's where they found their stride.
I agree.
That album is where I discovered them, City of Evil, and I think that's where I think they sounded like them. And the other thing, I don't know what kind of band they are. They don't really fit any other genre, really. They're kind of their own thing. I can't think of anything else they sound like.
I agree with that. They're progressive, but they're not... I don't even know. Even Hail to the King, which is kind of a standout album for them because it's not as progressive, still doesn't sound like anyone else. I think it's because of his voice.
That could be. Yeah. I mean, the voice is... I think the voice is a love it or hate it.
Yep.
It's very much a Rush in that sense, where people are either like, yeah, whatever, or they're like, oh God, worst voice I've ever heard in my life. And there's not really much around that, because certain things, people are funny with music, because I think there's certain things that are just like so subjective where you can't get around that. And voice is one of them. You can be like, well, it's got some of the greatest guitar work ever, and you could listen to it for that. And some people will be like, oh no, it's the worst voice I've ever heard in my life. So they can't appreciate the rest of it.
Maybe
that happens with some things. The cymbals are total jingle keys on City of Evil. Though.
Yes,
the entire album is. I can't believe how bad the cymbals sound.
They definitely don't sound good. I didn't think they were. No, during the core. Yeah, you're right. There is jingle keys. See, like, I'm still a little bit biased and blinded to a lot of this because it was kind of like our Biffy Clyro video. I was like, this sounds amazing. But then when we listened to it, I realized it really didn't. Because you kind of brought me back down to earth on it.
Right.
So with some of these, I'm hearing it and I'm like, I agree with what you said about you kind of have to pick things out in the mix in it. Like, there's nothing that... Like, compared to their later stuff where everything just sounds good in the mix no matter what, and you can hear it all the time.
Yeah.
City of Evil, I kind of have to listen for the drums, or I have to listen for certain things. So,
but it also the drums aren't the drums are 2D. Did you notice that
on City of Evil? Yeah, like I can hear them.
Yeah,
but it sounds like they're right here, and then there's nothing. There's no depth to them at all.
Yeah,
it's like an attack, and then where does it go?
Now, what I will praise them for is there wasn't a mix on any album where I thought it sounded like the drums weren't staged properly. I think they were all staged right in the mix, but they either had no girth, there's no punch, or the cymbals are wrong, or it's the wrong snare. Like, there was always something, but it was never... Sometimes drums are like totally pushed like left and right, where you don't get like that stage kind of feel, staged drums kind of feel.
Right. Like
you should get. I don't think I got that on any album. I think they all, for the most part, sounded right.
I think that was one of my bigger takeaways across as time went on for them. Things are recorded right, they're just not mixed right for most of them. Where I like the guitar tone on Nightmare, I like the guitar tone on the stage, I like some of the drums on the stage, but then some of the mix is like, I can't hear the guitar in the one song, or I lose the kick drum, or something. But the texture and the recording of the instruments themselves are usually on point.
Yes.
So, the self-titled one.
Let's move to that.
It lost. I think that was more flat than City of Evil. Like it really it's louder, but at the same time, I don't know. There's something about it that just doesn't. It's the texture and the overall girth just isn't there.
Yeah.
I lose the kick drum a lot. The guitar tone, everything is loud, but it still feels like it's not, like it was afraid to get, and it doesn't sound, maybe the whole thing kind of sounds 2D. Maybe that's a better way to describe it.
I think this was probably their most, I called it an average sounding album. But this one had the worst cymbals because you couldn't hear them a lot of times.
Yeah.
They were like too hard panned left and right, and then it would match like a tone with like guitars where the point where they would cancel, like you couldn't hear them anymore, which I didn't get on any other album but this one. Again, guitars were too quiet.
Yep.
And this was punchier than City of Evil. I'll give it that. The drums were punchier. But yes, things drop out of the mix.
Yep.
Like you said, it just wasn't notable.
Instrument-wise, no. The vocals, I still feel like they were probably the best and most consistent. Even on City of Evil, I feel like you can always hear his voice. Like, that's not something you ever have to pick out of the mix.
Right.
They definitely got away from the like layers of harmonies on their self-titled one a little bit more. But this album, I feel like up to that point, they all had a theme and like a cohesive sound. This one, I feel like they lost their footing a little bit, meaning it didn't feel like a start to finish City of Evil where every song it feels like it's kind of following the same kind of theme. This one was kind of just thematically all over the place, which is okay. I love most of the songs on that. I don't think there's one I wouldn't listen to.
Yeah,
but
I mean, there's certain bands that
different.
there's certain bands that have albums that feel like more of just a collective of songs. I can't listen to enough of Avenged music to really get a full grasp on an album. I listen to enough to kind of get a feel for the mixes on them, but other than that, I mean, it's just not. There's a few songs I really like, but it's just not something I can listen to all the way through. It's not really my style.
Interesting. Oh, yeah, it's probably a combination of the progressiveness and his voice, which is what
Probably yes.
makes you kind of go,
Yeah.
not my bag.
Yeah. I mean, they're like a greatest hits band for me. You know,
There's bands like that.
Beast in the Harlot's great, and Backcountry I like, and there's a couple other ones in there. But I mean, so moving on to the next one.
Nightmare.
Yes.
So this was a different drummer.
Right.
It's obvious immediately. As soon as that kick drum comes in, it is thick. Those drums are heavy on this album. I think this might be their most metal, traditional metal. I don't even know if I can call it that. Everything about it just has like a heavier punch to it, but it's I don't know if it had quite the girth or the clarity that Hail to the King has, but it's darker. I feel like the texture on this one is darker. It's not as flat as the two previous ones. The guitar tone I'm okay on. There's something that has like a weird mid-range sound to it, but it kind of chugs. It's got that tube amp texture to it. I love it in that regard, but still didn't quite get there where Hail to the King was, as far as overall production goes.
Right. And move yourself back just a bit from your mic, just so that you're well, you're like up here, you're clipping a bit.
Oh, okay.
Nightmare. I think this is where things started to sound pretty good, and this was probably the most even keel without sounding great. I think guitars, again, like I said, across the board, I think they're too quiet, but the drums started to sound pretty good.
Yes.
And the voice was good. This was like very average sounding, I think, to me. It was probably the most average, I guess, of them. where you kind of listen to it and go, it sounds normal.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not blowing my hair back, but it's, decent.
Yeah, it's probably the better of everything so far as their albums go.
For sure. Yeah. It was the best sounding up to this point.
In my opinion, performance-wise and writing and just it's very aggressive. There's a couple slower songs on there, but man, that last song, it's like an epic outro. I mean, I feel like they got more progressive on this album, maybe. No, City of Evil was highly progressive. Self-titled kind of dialed it back a little bit. Nightmare got more progressive, and then Hail to the King went way back away from progressive and more traditional as far as the song structure and all that goes. So but it always sounds like them. And I think it's just because the way they play guitar and the way he sings, there's, like we said earlier, there's no one else that sounds like them. Really.
Yeah, no.
I would always know, even if they had another singer, you would know that it's them playing guitar. There's always those kind of hard, like dueling harmonies that they do or whatever.
Yeah. I didn't know you were so into most of their stuff. I thought it was more.
Oh yeah. Everything from City of Evil up till now, I can listen front to back.
Wow.
Yeah. I think a lot of it was because I like playing. City of Evil is the most fun to play on guitar for me. And Nightmare a little bit, some Hail to the King, a couple songs on there. The stage is a little bit too advanced and complicated for me to just learn by ear, but yeah, it's my bag.
Interesting.
Progressive metal with singers that sound like most people wouldn't want to listen to them.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like Avenged used to be a band that, like around the City of Evil era, they were kind of like a meme. Like people it was like not cool to be a fan of theirs in a way. Because they were kind of like, I don't know, maybe it was their image that threw people off. That was probably it.
Well, I think they kind of fell into that. It was like radio rock. They were getting radio play and
with Backcountry.
Yeah, their image and stuff like that. I don't think it's lasted for them though. I think that kind of went away. Sometimes that stigma will stick.
Oh yeah, it's definitely changed. I think after Hail to the King, they probably became more accepted. I think they look more mature now too. Their image is a little bit more. They're not like wearing, I don't know, the stuff they used to wear during City of Evil. It just there's I don't know, something about their image just didn't look mature enough.
Yeah, I mean they definitely grew up a bit as time went on.
And they were definitely partying a lot during that. If you've ever watched like an old performance of them on stage during that time, a little rough. But their later stuff sounds amazing. Like after the self-titled, I think they started getting their act together a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, their next album, I think the title of it couldn't be any more fitting.
It's the King.
It is the King.
I agree. It's the highest production value.
Yes. Do you want to go first?
Yes. Well,
go ahead.
Sure. The depth on this album, everything from the drums, the guitar, you can all have it playing at the same time, and you don't lose any of it ever. The kick drum is always there. The guitars are always there. I feel like it's three-dimensional. His vocal is always cutting through. I really have not any negative points except for maybe the hi-hats and the cymbals a couple times. I'm like, I don't think it's a texture thing. It's more of like how they put it in the mix sounded a little bit weird. Like in Shepherd of Fire, sometimes the cymbals feel like they cut out at like a weird time. I don't know. It's just something I noticed, but like we said before, this album's the least progressive, I think. They maybe get a little bit there, but this is more like classic metal, which I think is what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's the most polished. It's got the most girth. It's dynamic. It's clear. And it's another album. I hated it when it came out, but now listening to it more, like it's another start to finish album. Like over the past couple of years, it became a better album for me. It just doesn't fit in with everything else they've done. that's it.
I think so. I agree. I mean, I remember the first time I heard this album, and it sounded like it just reminded me of Metallica.
Yeah,
all the way through, and which over time, I've come to terms with that. It doesn't bother me a whole lot. But I mean, mix wise, this is what we put on to like start off when we're listening to something, and we sit down and we put this on to like make sure everything's kosher with
the bar
with the sound system. I mean, it's incredible how punchy this is. The drums are perfect. The guitars are staged really well. Again, it could be a personal taste thing, but I do still feel like they carried that. They're louder than they were on the other albums, but they were still just a little bit too quiet back there. But everything sounds excellent on this album. I mean, it should be considered a high fidelity album to listen to.
I agree.
I don't get it either, because you look at like lists of like the greatest sounding albums, and like the things that we keep finding that sound so great are never on there.
No, they're not.
Why?
They're not mainstream enough, maybe, for people to be like, oh, I'll listen to Avenged Sevenfold. Maybe, but the one standout example of that list kind of thing is like Fleetwood Mac was one of the top sounding ones. That was one of the worst sounding things I've ever heard in my life. It sounded like a tin guitar with plastic strings on it smashed against the wall. The whole thing just felt like somebody had a tape machine and they held up like their phone to it and recorded it.
Yeah.
Downsampled it to like the lowest quality. And that's not that bad, but
no, keep going. This is good.
Downsampled it to a lowest quality MP3, played it through earbuds, and then recorded that in a coffee can. And that's what you get. It's not that. It wasn't that bad, but it hurt my ears to listen to it.
Yeah, that was one of those things where we need to do this. We need to go through one of these lists, and I remember listening to some of the things that were on there. 9 Inch Nails was another one that was on there, and like I get the praise for somebody making their own album, like what Trent Reznor did. Yes, that is, an incredible thing. He wrote it and performed it and produced it, and put the stickers on the CDs, and he sold them and did all that stuff. I get that, but that doesn't mean that it's a high fidelity, phenomenal sounding mix on the album. Like that was, which one was that? What was that album called? The one with Closer on it. I'm not a fan, so I don't know.
Not either.
But that is one that makes a list of fidelity, like high fidelity albums, and I was so confused. That's something that we'll have to cover, but anyway, I mean, Hail to the King, I don't know what else to say about it other than this is something that people should put on their list for things to play on your brand new super Bowers and Wilkins speakers that you buy
for your tube amp.
Seriously,
that should be they should demo speakers in stores.
Yes,
using this album.
Yes,
if you want to hear punchy drums.
Yes, it's all there.
Start to finish, it's consistent through the album too.
Yeah,
drums are always kicking your ass. Like the song in the middle, "This Means War," just the single kick drum during the verses. It's like the devil is walking across your floor. It's so loud, and it just feels so big in the mix that I don't know how they did it. I don't want to know. I like not knowing. I don't want to peek behind the curtain. It's kind of like when you watch like the making of something, it ruins it.
I know.
I can't ever do it.
Yes.
Like the making of an album, like making of like how the actor got into the role. Like I don't want to see any of that either.
Yeah, it's really funny how like the magic of things makes things better.
Oh, it does.
It happens to me with cars too. I never really have said this before, but like if I buy a car and as soon as I take like some of it apart or do something, it kind of ruins the allure of that car to me for some reason. Like I'm like, it's just nuts and bolts behind that dashboard. And I thought it was magic.
It's kind of like when you really get to know somebody. Like, maybe I made a mistake. It's like a movie trailer. This looks awesome. And when you see the movie,
Yes.
it's like the first month of dating. This is good. This is good. You get all the surface level good stuff, and then later,
you learn what you're really dealing with.
exactly. What you were saying about the high fidelity albums reminded me of Leonardo DiCaprio. Now hear me out.
Oh boy.
Leo is consistent in every movie he's in, but I feel like we're always seeing the same character, no matter what. And for the longest time, he never won an Oscar until The Revenant. And I don't really think he did anything different in that other than film the movie out in the wilderness, which was probably pretty challenging. I think he's hardworking. I think he's good on screen, but he's like someone who would be on a list of best actors, like a high fidelity album. Like, this is what people really, I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, he's somebody you would find on a like top actors list, but when you really evaluate all of his work, sure, they're great movies, but he's not really a versatile actor if you really look at him.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I kind of see what you're saying about him. I kind of missed your parallel with the Fidelity albums, though. Run that by me again.
Like, when you see an album on that list and you finally listen to it and you're like, what are they talking about? This is not high fidelity. I'm saying that he's not like a Fleetwood Mac. He's not that bad. But he's not somebody I would list off as a top tier actor, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As far as real acting goes. Now, seeing camera presence or like how good his movies are, that's different. I'm talking about how does he transform himself to become the role. I always see Leo no matter what. No matter how he changes his voice, I always see him. There's a couple actors where I don't see the actor anymore.
How about Gilbert Grape? I mean, was he still Leo in that?
He's so young in that. It's hard to say. Probably not. Maybe a little. No, that's a good one.
I see what you're saying. I mean, yeah, for the most part, he
has the same mannerisms. When he gets into like an intense scene, he has the same like way he delivers it. You got to really pay attention to it, but I pick up on it.
That's funny.
I didn't want to go off on a tangent too much on acting, but I thought that was a good
funny. I like that.
Back to Avenged.
Yeah.
I have one more album.
Yes.
The Stage. Go
ahead, take it away.
I think this is their pinnacle writing and performance of progressive metal.
Yeah, again, I listened to some of it, and it's a very interesting album, but go ahead.
This one takes you off into outer space, and that's kind of what the theme of it is. It's very spacey. The drums I have a lot of problems with. They're harsh attack, and there's almost no girth. They get lost in the mix often. Sometimes they can kind of carry it, like in the first song in the intro. They're not bad, but in other songs, I'm like, I can't hear anything that's going on. I feel like they kind of went back to City of Evil a little bit. It's a little bit more polished and has better texture than that, but the mix can get really messy on this one. But I really liked his vocal still sits above everything else. I think the performances are amazing, but the guitar, I think what you said on the other one still rings true. It's not really cutting through as much as it should be. Mm-hmm. They felt a little like in that first riff, they should be, I guess Hail to the King kind of set the standard. Like, it doesn't have that three-dimensional feel to it anymore.
Right.
But it's not quite as bad. It's somewhere in between City of Evil and Nightmare. I think it might be a little better than, it's so hard to gauge all of these, but
yeah, I have it written down as it sounds more like Nightmare.
It's closer to that, yeah.
It sounds like it was recorded well, but it doesn't sound like it was mixed. It sounds like the mix was just lazy. It sounds like they kind of just threw it all together. And if you listen to Hail to the King and how wide it sounds and how spacious, and then all of a sudden this comes on and it's like everything's like this big all of a sudden.
It's more narrow, and they tried to fit everything into there, and you're like, I lose the kick drum, I lose like the snare. Sometimes you even lose like you can hear the attack, but then I don't hear anything else sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's same thing, my same complaint all the way through. Guitars are too quiet. It's not as punchy as the other albums. And actually, this is where his vocals kind of went backwards to me too.
Interesting.
He sounds more strained than the other ones. Like I noticed it like almost like he went back to where he was trying to sing before they kind of found their stride. I don't know if he's kind of blown himself out at this point, or because I felt like on Hail to the King, he was really doing a good job sounding more
normal.
Yeah, normal, more fluent, smoother. It was prettier done the way he sang. And then now he's kind of back into that weird pitchy thing that he does that was driving me kind of nuts.
He did have like a vocal problem. They had to cancel part of their tour because I think he had like...
Didn't he rip his vocal cords apart screaming initially?
Early on, I think he did. I think that's why they stopped screaming, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But I think it was during the stage somewhere in the late 20-teens, they had to cancel their tour because of his voice. I forget what he did, but I think he had like polyps on his vocal cords or something, or he ruptured something. I don't remember.
That's a sign of I'm not singing properly.
Yeah, or he's singing too much.
Yes,
but probably not. Probably both.
Because he sounds like somebody who,
like a little bit of Corey Taylor. He's just like he's like pushing it, but it's not coming out.
Well, Corey now, yes. But Corey has sang the way that he sang for 2 decades. I don't know how he can even speak and still have a voice.
Drinking and doing.
In the studio, Corey still sounds good, but live, he's got that. It's got that strained feel to it, which this is how this guy's always sounded to me. It's very strained, and that's always what kind of bothered me about him, I guess.
I could see that. Yeah, I do hear that strainedness in his voice on this one, especially when he goes for the higher notes. It's like, I don't know if he's going to come back from that. But I think his range is still there. I watched them do an acoustic performance at, I forget where it was. It was like a music hall, or it was a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or something. And he can still do it. That album, yeah, I think that was 2016.
I'm curious about voices because there's people that have their voices just have that where you can't replicate it. Hitting notes is different than sounding like someone. So, for instance, the guy from the newer singer from AC/DC. I don't know his name. But when you listen to him sing, I'm like, that's not... People's voices don't sound like that normally. It's... You either have it or you don't. And the way that this... What's this guy's name in Avenged Sevenfold?
Matt Shadows.
Yeah. His voice has a unique sound to it, whether if it's because of his injury or because of whatever. You can't replicate how that is. Nope. It just is what it is. And there's Corey Taylor has a little bit of grit to his voice that you can replicate to a degree, but you can't. Trying to sound like somebody's different than trying to hit notes.
Oh, 100%.
Is what I'm trying to say. And this guy, he sounds a certain way, and you just cannot.
Nobody could sing like that.
Yeah.
You might get somebody who has like that rasp quality, but you won't. It won't be the same. I think, yeah, like you said, you either have it or you don't. That you're just born with it. You can improve it and improve your range to be able to hit different notes, but the quality and control is generally going to be like, find a singer who sounds different over time. I mean, maybe they change with age, but generally they're always going to have what makes them unique. So,
right.
I think they have a new album in the works. I thought it was going to be out this year, but I think it's going to be next year. And they said it's not going to be like anything they've done before, but I think every band says that every time they release an album. This is our best work. We've never done something like this before.
That usually means it's their worst stuff.
It might be. Who knows? I have no idea what to expect. They've done so many different things. I think they've tried a lot of different things. Like looking at each album, and they went through a couple different drummers at a time after the Rev passed away. It was after their self-titled. That was Mike Portnoy on Nightmare from Dream Theater.
Oh yeah.
He-
Oh
he
right.
toured with them a little bit.
Right.
I actually got
That's
to see them when they were touring with
Yeah.
with him. It's pretty cool.
Hmm.
And then Hail to the King, I think, was somebody totally different. And then the stage was Brooks Walkerman, who I think is a permanent drummer now. He's from is it Bad Religion, or he's been in a couple bands. He's kind of legendary. I think he's really good. I think he's a good fit for them long term.
Interesting. I the Rev was, I think, because City of Evil I listened to a little bit of that, and I go, man, this band was really where they sounded the most unique, and for its time, kind of different, I guess. I had never really heard anything like it.
Nothing else like it.
And the Rev was, he suited it perfectly, and I don't know if they've ever found that since. They've kind of bounced around a bit, and I don't know if it's ever really going to sound like that ever again.
I 100% agree. The stage is probably the closest they ever got to that, but I feel like that's their matured sound that is closest to them. But City of Evil has something about it. I don't know what. It's there
is a charm to it.
There is.
There's something different about that album. There are certain albums out there that, it's like Rush's Moving Pictures. It has a certain sound that you're never going to like replicate.
Right.
It's one of those standout albums that that everybody kind of talks about. So, and I think City of Evil is that. Unfortunately, it's just not a notable mix to listen to.
No.
But that's all my notes.
Yeah, they have that's pretty much all I had too. I think we covered, they have a B-sides album, and I think they have a couple singles on an album called Black Rain, where they had
Is that
the
like
Halloween tracks, and they did a couple Call of Duty.
Is it like
songs.
a Prince? Is it like a Prince cover or something?
No. No. Black REIN Rain. Not Rain.
Oh.
They did Halloween songs for like Call of Duty Zombies.
Oh, really?
I think it was one or two.
Huh.
They're actually good songs, but the mix on them, it's even worse because they're not like finished songs. They're like B-side quality, in my opinion. So, But yeah, that's all I have for Avenged. They're going to be one of my favorite bands of all time forever. Even if I hit an album like Hail to the King where I'm like, I hate this, I'll probably love it later.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'd be curious to see what comes next to them. I mean, the only thing I could say is mix it right.